And we are honored to have Juliana Sassano.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you also to Truth Collins for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with you. I love the programs that you're offering. I'm going to look at the dates and the times of the week and see if I can join any of them. They all seem very intriguing and very good subjects, very good topics. So the subject for today is contentment, and I feel that here I am among friends and among fellow seekers. So I won't be sharing with you anything you haven't heard before. I won't share with you new information. But what I would like to share with you is this space together as an opportunity to see contentment, perhaps in a new light, but most of all, to see contentment as a possibility in our lives. So to take this time together to see what contentment means for ourselves right now, how to find contentment, how to be in touch with that, and make it a force in our lives. Before we start, I would like to share with you a premise for you to consider, just to consider, and to perhaps see it through your daily experience. So as you go through the experiences of this week, you could see how this premise actually is true or not. And the premise says that we do not think ourselves into new ways of living, but we live ourselves into new ways of thinking. And I leave it as a possibility, as something that you can examine, that you can test with a scientific approach. See how that applies in your life. Like, we do not think ourselves into new ways of living, but we live ourselves into new ways of thinking. So let's see how this living can transform our lives. How, in this case, contentment can be a force of transformation in our lives. So this time that we have together will be more of a time for self-reflection, self-knowledge, self-introspection, and hopefully self-transformation. That I can't assure, but we will at least try to see what it means for us right now to look within and see. As we start, we perhaps have to agree more or less on what contentment means. What does contentment mean? And each one of us may have, our own sense of it, our own definition of it, and I'll share mine with you. To me, contentment is a steady, stable feeling of a gentle joy. So contentment is different from happiness and joy, in the sense that happiness and joy is usually associated with something that has a little bit more of an exaltation, something that we experience for some time, but not constantly. And that as we go up, we also go down. As we feel happy, joyful, then we may feel sad and depressed. But contentment has this feeling of of being stable, of being gentle, of not being too high or too low, of being just kind of in the middle. But it's something that brings well-being, balance, easiness, or yes, I think well-being is a word that describes it quite well. It's interesting. It was interesting for me, and this has been. I've been reading theosophical literature for many years. I was born within a family that was associated with the Theosophical Society, and later on in my life, I read more about other religious traditions, and I couldn't help but noticing that in the theosophical literature, there are not many references to contentment. There are not many references to happiness and joy. There are a lot of references about discontentment. So in that way, I can tell you that I am a lot more familiar myself with discontentment than I am with contentment. So in that way, I can say that I am a true theosophist. But of the little that I know of contentment, I can share with you and we can explore together. In some traditions, especially in some branches of Buddhism, they make great emphasis on happiness and joy. Even though one of the first things that the Buddha shared was that all is suffering, that all is dukkha. Dukkha is a Sanskrit word that is usually translated as sorrow or suffering or pain. So even though there is that premise, they diligently work on the cultivation of happiness and joy as part of their daily practice. In the understanding that the experience that we have, that we're living, is temporary and is to some extent, and from a certain perspective, illusory. But before we go into something that is more of an abstract, I would like us to see, how do we experience contentment? What does it mean for us in our daily life? And I would like to mention something that for me is one of the most beautiful moments of my day. And it is the moment in which I open my eyes in the morning. At some point in my life, I realized that moment is precious. In that moment, there is a window of opportunity. When I wake up, as soon as I wake up, everything that I am experiencing is pleasant, is comfortable. I would even say it's beautiful. There is the softness of the bed sheet, the softness of the cover, the warmth of the body, the light entering through the window, and how that light shines on different objects, the quietness of the moment, the peace of that moment. And as soon as I open my eyes, there are two possibilities. I can stay fully alive and fully present in that experience, or I can immediately jump in my to-do list or the story I'm telling myself about who I am, who I was, who I want to be, what kind of difficulties I'm experiencing, what is it that what is going to happen today, etc., etc. So to put it very simply, contentment is a state that exists, that is that we can perceive when we are fully awake in this moment, when we are fully present in the experience of this moment. And as simple as this sounds, it is not an easy task. Because, like I was saying, as soon as we wake up, there is this tendency of jumping immediately into the story I have created. In the theosophical literature, we talk of the personality. We talk about this temporary structure that we create to experience life at this physical level. But this is our immediate identification with that part of us is what brings dukkha, is what brings the sorrow or the pain or the heaviness or the conflict. So it's almost like an art, the development of this capacity to be here without commentary, without having to say something about it. When I'm experiencing this warmth, this comfort, I don't have to say how nice this is, or how bad this is, or how I like it, or how I dislike it. The task, let's say, is much more tasting the moment, like fully getting to know the experience of what it means to be alive without the intervention of the mind. And when I say the mind, I'm referring to the mind that moves, the mind that wants, the mind that identifies with this separate self. In theosophical terms, you'll find that as the lower mind, or the mind, the manas associated with karma, or the lower principles. So there are different ways of calling that part of us that wants constant movement, that part of us that always wants something about this moment, about tomorrow, etc. So extrapolating this, this moment of waking up that I invite you to try tomorrow, if you haven't, to make it as a little practice and see what it causes in you. Because this feeling that you had, if you prolong it, if you stay there for some time, it will come back to you throughout the day. And you'll find that contentment could be something as simple as watching a squirrel eat a nut, as it happened to me today when I was sitting and reflecting about contentment. And in the backyard where I live, there are these beautiful trees, and in the fall in the Chicago area, the fall is just amazing. The leaves, they're golden and orange and green, and there's this amazing tree behind our house, and the beauty is overwhelming. And in just the presence of that beauty, there is contentment. Now, I could have been sitting there very concerned about all the things that worry me at the moment. And coincidentally, and I don't think this is a coincidence, I had two of the most difficult weeks in the past 2 weeks that I have had in some time, while I was reflecting on contentment. So it was the perfect opportunity for me to see how to stay, or how to find contentment. What is contentment in the midst of worry, sadness, loss, change? Because we can all talk in the abstract, how beautiful contentment can be and what it is, and we can define it and say so many things about it. But the point is to live it, The point is to live contentment, even when life is hard. How do we do that? So what I can share with you is just the experience of these 2 weeks, which has been noticing the heaviness, noticing the sadness, noticing whatever it is that I'm going through, and letting go of what I'm telling myself about it. Letting go of that part of me that is moving, that wants something, that expects something. And the moment that part of me becomes still, becomes quiet, there's peace. And that peace has a flavor of contentment. The more we stay in that peace, the more it looks and feels like contentment. And the more we stay in that contentment, the more it feels and tastes like joy. So it's like we have to remove layer after layer after layer of movement, of wanting, of all this, of all these thoughts that come constantly in to judge, to say. And underneath all that movement, there is contentment. The quote that I sent Truth to put in the part of the promotion said, "Rejoice in the way things are." And this resonated with the quote that Jonathan mentioned from HPV that said, if we admit that we are on the stream of evolution, then each circumstance must be to us quite right. In the sense that there is a reason why things are in the way they are right now. There is a purpose for things to be in the way they are right now. But that doesn't make things easier for us. To know that this is part of my evolution, I have to go through this, or there has a purpose, doesn't necessarily help me go through it. This is just more movement. This is just telling myself something, so to see if I can convince myself that this is good. And at least for me, it doesn't work. It may have some element of help in it, but what has helped the most has been, as I said before, this quieting of the movement of the mind. And most of all, what I noticed that a lot of this movement had to do with wanting to control the outcome of things, of wanting life to turn in a particular way. And that attachment to the result, that attachment or wanting to control the end result of things is part of the game that the mind plays. It's part of this personality that thinks that can control the outcome of things in life. So the moment I can see this, and I can, because what happens is that we do it automatically. We do it sometimes unconsciously. We don't realize that we're trying to control life. But when we do, it's like shedding light on it. It's like placing this spotlight on the way I want to control this. So that knowing, that seeing, that awareness of it makes me realize that I can let go. That at least I can attempt, I can try to say, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to let go. I'm going to trust life. Because life knows better. And I was able to find peace. Again, I was able to find contentment. And this went on and on and on the entire 2 weeks, the entire 2 past weeks, in which I was, for the very first time, actively working on contentment, actively understanding what contentment means in my life, day by day by day. So the two greatest obstacles of the sense of joy are the movement of the mind and not trusting the process, not trusting that life has a plan, that there is a greater life in which I move and live and have my being, that knows so much better what is good for the soul and for the experience of the soul. And that profound trust is by itself an experience of contentment as well. Now, sometimes, especially when we're having a hard time, especially when we're going through rough times, there are some aids to our contentment. We can, a word, for example, saying to ourselves a word, saying to ourselves a phrase, listening to a song or a certain type of music, a certain place, meeting with certain people can have like a spark in us, like an effect of a spark that can ignite that contentment. And for each one of us, that's different. That's completely different. You know, what ignites contentment in me is very different from what does it in you. And the same thing with peace, and the same thing with love, and the same thing, you know, with other things as well. So it is, to me, it is important that part of the process we get to know ourselves enough to say, this is the place in which I can find a little bit of contentment. But this is the moment in which, like I said, these 5 minutes when I wake up in the morning, this is the moment where I can fill my cup of contentment, or remember this moment throughout the day. Or these are the words that I choose to say to myself as I go through this day. It could be something very personal, very, very personal. It could be something very abstract. One of the things that come to me is one of the recommendations of HPV and in her diagram of meditation, which is this, that what we meditate on is, I am all space and time. That's how the meditation actually ends, but the first part of it. But this phrase, I am all space and time, for me sometimes has the effect of realizing in that moment that I'm not just this person confined in this small moment, in this small story that I'm telling myself or that I am experiencing. And if I look back, the things that I lived, that I experienced 20, 30 years ago, most of them are irrelevant today. You know, like the things that worried me 20, 30 years ago have no consequence today. So why the things that worry me today should have a consequence or a heaviness on me? So this phrase of, I am all space and time, infinite. And you can, of course, choose your own, is for me a sense of breaking with the confinement, this temporary experience, and remembering that I'm much more than that I was never born, that I will never die. We seek, for the most part, I think we seek happiness outside ourselves. We seek contentment outside ourselves. And one of the most difficult things to do is to know how to find joy or happiness or contentment within yourself without the aid of anything else. It's not that the aid of something else is bad. It can be a beginning of understanding what contentment is. But ultimately, that happiness, that joy, that contentment is an inside job. It is something that we will only and truly find within. And it seems to me that the more we let go of our sense of being this body, being this name, being this mind, the more we let go of that, the more we find true contentment. A great part of this is stillness and silence, something our culture knows very little about. We seem to be a little allergic to silence and to stillness. And as it is mentioned in several writings, several philosophical writings, the only way in which our spiritual intuition can reach us is when the lower mind, when that mind that moves and wants, is completely still. So it is in this experience of silence, of deep silence, that we can touch, that we can experience other levels of being that are in resonance with contentment. So another question for us is something that seems irrelevant, but that has raised a lot of wondering, at least. And it is, where do I feel most at home? And contentment has to be as well with a sense of being home. And home is not necessarily related to a place or a physical place. Home can be silence. Home could be a book, a writer, or a person, a cup of coffee, the light entering through the window, a plant, a pet. So it's like finding the things that resonate with who I am, and finding contentment through that feeling of being at home. Now, I think it's important for us to know that there are cycles in our lives, and that keeping a high level of contentment is unnatural, and I think even it could be even harmful, like trying to keep levels of happiness, of being content. And this can happen as we try to force this idea of contentment in our lives. It's like, I have to be happy, or I have to be content, or and it has nothing to do with having to, because that becomes another objective, that becomes another task, another to-do list, another thing that I impose to myself, another mask that I put on. And it would be a shame if we did that with contentment or joy. So knowing how to live the moments of sadness, we will know how to live the moments of joy. Life is never a steady road. It is always a movement of change, a constant change. And it's darkness and it's light. And the more we become familiar with the darkness and the light of life, like truly familiar with it, because what happens is that we're kind of like a bit afraid of it. like we are afraid of darkness. But the moment we sit in darkness and we're there, we make friends with it, we notice it. It's just like anything else. So when we sit with pain, heaviness, stress, and we fully sit with it and stay with it, we let it be with us, then we can let be and our sense of contentment as well. So whatever we're experiencing is okay, as long as we experience it completely, fully. And then many times the lack of contentment, like I was saying, is movement. It's movement. When that movement ceases, we may still feel sorrow in the heart. We may still feel sadness, but it's different. It's a sensation. It's no longer a thought that is telling me how bad my life is going. It's just a feeling. It's a sensation. And I can stay with that sensation. So then as I learn to stay with that, then the layers of contentment begin to emerge from underneath. So it's not that I'm trying to cover anything or change anything. I'm just learning to stay and to be fully alive in whatever it is that I am experiencing. Something that I want to say before we move into a conversation is that by no means I'm saying that in the search for contentment, we should stay in unhealthy situations. There's a story of Ramana Maharshi, who was a mystic and a sage from the Hindu tradition, and he was an enlightened being, and he was still in his physical form, and there was an ashram built for him, and he would, at the end of his life, most of his life, he wouldn't even talk to anyone, but at the end of his life, he would give some teaching and answer questions. And one time, thieves came into the ashram and they wanted to vandalize and steal things. And Ramana Maharshi said, let them do what they came here to do. Let them do what they came here to do. And he did nothing. And he let all that happen, and things got destroyed. So what I want to say with this is, like, our mistake would be to think that we can act like Ramana Maharshi as well. And we cannot. In what sense? In the same way that he probably will be able to live in an unhealthy situation because he was completely beyond that. He was completely above that. And he wouldn't even be touched by that. So, but if I am in an unhealthy situation, I would become an unhealthy human being, most possibly. Because the level of maturity of my soul is not the level of maturity of the soul of Ramana Maharshi. So for us, life is a constant opportunity of discerning. What does the soul need to flourish? What does the soul, through this experience that I'm living, need to become what became to do, or to become who it became to be? And for that, sometimes we have to discern and take ourselves out of situations, or take ourselves out of relationships, or take ourselves out of whatever conditions, because they are not healthy for our development, for our well-being. Now, there are situations that we can handle a lot better, and we can develop contentment even in those situations. The greatest people are able to develop contentment, or to live with joy in the hardest of places. But that's them. That doesn't mean that we're there. So we have to see where we're at, and it's all like a trial and error for us. So everything has to be balanced with our level of maturity. And the last thing I want to say is that throughout these 2 weeks that I had, the chance to observe myself, particularly in the light of contentment, I was able to see very clearly that joy or peace or contentment are so important to have with us when it comes to others. Like the more content we are, the more in touch we are with joy, the more we infuse that in others, the more we can help others, the more others can rely, or it's like it's being a light, and so others can sometimes find shelter in that light. But again, not as an imposition, not as something that I have to carry as a burden, but whenever I can be a light, I am a light for others. And that for me makes it even more meaningful, even more important. It's the service aspect of why being content. So
wonderfully clear, lucid, and so thoughtful and helpful. My name is, I don't know if you can see my thing isn't here. I can't see anything, but I do have a question for you, if I might ask, because I think you would have a superb insight into it. Here's the question. I think it's a matter of universal agreement that the Dalai Lama is seemingly one of the most content, inwardly joyful people, persons one could meet. Yet, on the other hand, part of his requirements for meditation is to meditate on the suffering of humanity. How is it that someone who suffers, or rather meditates on the suffering of humanity, is also one of the most content human beings one can encounter?
Yes. Thank you, James, for bringing that up. I don't think I have an answer for that. What I can share is just some insight, and then everybody else can join with their own. I think it has to do with what I mentioned before about the cultivation of our capacity just to be. In that cultivation of the capacity of us to stay and to see and to feel and to notice and to sense, we grow in our knowing of this being a temporary experience. And we also grow, for the Dalai Lama in particular, I would say, underneath all the layers of movement, there's deep joy. The stages of dhyana, the stages of meditation, have been described by those who have reached them at some level, have been described like incredible states of bliss. And that bliss has an impact in us. It cannot just be a sensation or a feeling of a moment. The states of dhyana really transform us.
Yeah.
So I feel that underneath, when we have cultivated those states of being, then sorrow is, it must be, it must still be. It's still sad when we think of the suffering of others. It can be very sad. But there is underneath a layer that sustains us, that is of pure bliss, that is steady, that is strong, that is rooted in something that is permanent.
Is that underlying matter you're referring to, could it be compassion? And could compassion then be one of the means by which we do experience contentment?
I think so, absolutely. I would think so, yes.
So it looks like, as you're familiar with these Zoom meetings, people
Yes,
are.
yeah. Judy had a question, and then Shobha. So Judy, I was.
You might have to unmute, Judy.
Yeah.
I unmuted, yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Very beautiful and contenting. I really would like to know if you could compare contentment to vairaga, the fourth virtue in the six paramitas, indifference to pleasure and to pain, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived, because it seems very important that we are content with the karma that we have made for ourselves, although most people are not. But it seems that vairaga, being able to accept what has happened and go on from there, is very important. And I think it is essential to contentment. Do you agree?
Yes. So as I understand it, vairagya is detachment, or that's one of the ways that it is translated. And detachment is certainly, detachment is a word that can have for ourselves like a connotation. For you, detachment means something in particular. For another person, it means something else, slightly different sometimes. But if you see detachment as not getting hooked in whatever it is that we think or want, so it's like, detachment can be seen as not only not wanting objects or not wanting the outcome to be in a particular way, the outcome of a situation, not wanting this and wanting that, but also detachment is not getting hooked into what I think. So in the example that I gave of waking up in the morning, vairagya is the state in which I decide to stay fully present in the sensations of being alive, instead of getting hooked in the thought of, this is what I have to do today, this is what I need to accomplish, how is going to happen at work, why did this person do this to me yesterday? So certainly vairagya has, the development of vairagya has an effect on contentment. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Shobha?
Yeah, I was just thinking of something when you were talking about contentment. When you look at the story of Arjuna, he started with discontent, despondency, and came to contentment. When you look at the story of Siddhartha, Prince Siddhartha, who became Gautama Buddha, he was discontented with the suffering that he saw, which his father had tried to keep him away from. And then you also look at Rama in the Yoga Vashishta. He was discontent, and Vashishta gives him the knowledge that he needs to break out of his discontentment. So it's very interesting to see how the discontent in the case of the great ones leads to contentment in the end. Mm-hmm. Do you have any comment for that? And by the way, Juliana, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us. That's a wonderful comment. I really appreciate that. I think that not only that discontentment was a powerful feeling for those who became enlightened, but I think discontentment is a powerful feeling for every human being. Mm. Some people spoke of creative discontentment, this discontentment that makes us search, that makes us seek that makes us wonder, why is this happening? How can I, free myself from this or from this situation? I could say, most of my life, I have felt discontent. And I came with I think a big portion of melancholy in my nature, a melancholic nature. But this, I think, it's the experience of a lot of spiritual people, or people who seek truth, people who seek to live a spiritual life, not being content with the state of the world, the way things are, society, rules, the things that don't make sense for us. And there is, that is more of a surface level, but there is a discontentment that is, to me, more of a sense of wanting to be home, like really wanting to go back home. And that is the greatest and deepest discontentment that pushes forward. And I think it's necessary. Like I was saying, these cycles, there are cycles in which we have to let whatever is the sorrow or the pain to be there, because that is what is going to push us forward to seek even deeper, to let go of the things that we don't need, or we don't need any longer in the path, whatever that is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Juliana,
Yes.
could I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Well, first of all, three things. One is your presentation was just magnificent and so helpful, I think. And it's interesting what you said about the melancholy. I was thinking of Abraham Lincoln was actually famous for being a bit melancholy. And he spent some time in your neck of the woods, so to speak, in the part of the world that you live. But thank goodness he was discontent with the status quo in a way, right?
Exactly.
But I was thinking about what you said about what kind of happened to you. You got this request to do something out of contentment. What was that, like back in June or something?
Yes.
There was some emails going around, and Jan Kin thought that you would be a great addition and so forth. And okay, it's in the email, and I'll think about that. But then when it came closer, just so much, I guess we'll call it karma, but just something started happening, where you had to deal with this subject and so forth. I was wondering if that's something that, if you thought that that's something that happens kind of in the soul, that once a soul kind of makes a resolve and a commitment, then life starts to kind of happen around that thing, even if it's a challenge to make it seem like that thing that the soul has kind of committed itself to, it appears to be going against it, but it's also part of the dialogue of going towards it. I was wondering if the kind of the potency of commitment and resolve kind of starts to help us go deeper into a given area.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's what happened. Go ahead. I'll quit talking. So
No, thank you. I was just going to say that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. I fully agree with that. I think the commitment is an energy, is a force that we put forward, and it has a karmic effect, or some type of like commitment is a very strong action, and it receives its proper reaction as well. Like life comes to our aid for us to unfold that commitment. And for me, it's in the last few years, I have tried as much as possible that if I'm going to speak about something, I'm going to speak from a point of in which I can offer something that I have lived, something that I have tried to live, at least. And if I cannot share what I have lived, I can share how much I have struggled not to be able to live it.
Mm.
And so it's possible, yeah, that life, puts that on my way, so I could be of help and
Yeah.
first of all to myself.
Yeah. Well, sorry about the challenges, but I think we've reaped some of the benefit. So
We do, you do, yes.
not just the challenges, but of the benefit of you working your way through them. That's the other half of the equation, right? So
Yeah. Thank you.
Does any other, let's see, we have another few minutes. Ken, do you want to just come up here? I'll stand aside. We've got a live person here. Here we go.
Here in the lodge. Hi, I'm Ken. Earlier I was on the
I can, yes.
meet and see you. So my kind of revelation, I'm so glad to hear in the program today, you sharing about waking up in the morning and having some minutes of just being still and quiet, and then some other techniques that one might use, like a song or a person or a place. Like here, the lodge is kind of a place like that, this building that we're sitting in, a few of us here. And one thing that I've landed on, given sort of my Byzantine complex mind, is the Nadi Shodhana Pranayama, the alternate nose breathing. But I realized I don't have to do that. I can just look at a squirrel or a bird and have that same kind of phenomenon. And I'm wondering, besides in your own particular spiritual practices, if you have a meditational technique, in addition to the one you described so eloquently about waking up in the morning and just being there without any judgments or assessments and just experiencing that beingness of consciousness.
Yes.
Share with us.
Thank you. That's a great point. And I sort of said something about it when I said, contentment can be watching a squirrel eating a nut. And that's exactly what happened to me today. When I was sitting under these trees, these magnificent trees. Nature for me has like a huge effect. And it may be for most of us, sitting in nature, it has this incredibly calming effect. And the beauty of nature resonates with something deeper within us. And certainly, at that moment of these golden leaves moving all simultaneously, and there's like golden and orange, like deep orange leaves all moving. It's like, oh my gosh, all this life here, so magnificent. And all of a sudden, it's like the crunchy sound of a squirrel eating a nut, and it was just that laughter. I had to laugh about it because it was so cute.
Yeah.
And yes, so. But for that to happen, any other given day, I could have been sitting there worried about something or thinking about something and missing the whole thing. And so the seed of contentment is in every moment, only if we have eyes to see it.
Well, very good. Thank you. That's a wonderful contrast to what the voice of the silence describes, that hall of learning where every flower has a snake underneath it. It's the opposite. It's like in every moment, there's the possibility of bliss and joy. Well, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So let me check the chat very quickly. I think we have thank yous.
You can read the thank yous.
Okay, so I particularly like the idea of being able to be content while handling the possible dissatisfactions of daily life, focusing on it with that first sentence of the day. I was never born, nor will I will ever die. Yes, I was never born and I will never die. It seems it gives us the opportunity to stay engaged as we should. Well, as you said, uncovering layers of contentment within us. Thank you so much. And that was from you, Monica. Thank you. I didn't read it was from you. And then Eileen, your description of contentment as a steady, stable feeling of gentle joy is most helpful and lovely. Thank you, Eileen.
Looks like Truth has got his hand up.
Yes, Truth.
Oh, I was just wondering if you had any comment on something that comes to mind with me is just like a frames of reference. Like sometimes being around children can remind us of what contentment is, or getting some fresh air, going out in nature, or watching the nature channel with animals, doing just like the squirrels, like you said. So I was just thinking, do you have any thoughts in that direction?
Yes, thanks, Truth. So, I mentioned that as we, in the same way that sometimes a word or a book or a person or can spark that sense of contentment, it is also true, with nature, with animals, with children, especially who are so naturally content. And for the most part, I have a child that can attest that's not always the case, but we come as human beings. I think we come with the natural ability to see the beauty in things, to enjoy things before we become concerned about our lives and what we need and want. When those things are covered, we have the natural ability to connect with joy. So being around children is definitely something that sparks contentment and joy. I taught Spanish to a group of children, kindergarten kids, for a few years. And no matter what was happening in my life, that moment in which I was with them, 30 minutes, it was always joyful. Like, there wasn't a day that I left that class that I wasn't laughing out loud. So, yeah, I agree with you, Truth.
I have one more question. Some people, they say that that nobody sees things the same way. It's like this is my reality kind of line of thinking, like their contentment. Do you think there are standards for contentment, or it's like, how do you relate to other people in a sense, like their idea of contentment could be pretty different?
Yes, I think that there is no recipe for contentment that applies to all, but it's truly something that we have to look within and find for ourselves. We can certainly try to help others find contentment, but ultimately I think it is the same way that we search for truth, or we search for who we are. It's something that we have to do on our own. Yeah. I think. What do you think, Truth?
Well, I mean, sometimes people tell you that we don't see the same colors. Like, I see what I think is blue, but you may see it that, and it's actually something else. So that was kind of the direction I was going with. And I just don't have an answer to that myself. So I just gotta kind of find some contentment in it, not knowing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
I had another question.
Okay.
I was thinking about Jim Teffer's question about dukkha and the Dalai Lama. And I can't really know about the Dalai Lama, but I was thinking about this idea of dukkha. I mean, you brought it up in your talk and so forth. It's kind of the acknowledgement of suffering. And that somehow that's part of the equation, and that denying it is just somehow running away or something. And it gives us another task to do, for example. But part of the Fourfold Noble Path, I think, I mean, ultimately it's good news, even though the first idea is suffering. So how could the first idea out of a system of four things be good news, But the rest of it kind of is good news, because it says, well, it has a cause, has to do with grasping, so forth. and then it has a prognosis of healing. Hey, this can be fixed. And then it gives some medicine, which is the Eightfold Path: right living, right philosophy, right effort, right action, right meditation. I can't remember them all, but there is a path. And I was wondering if some of the good news about working through contentment would be is the faith in the soul that I have the wherewithal within me that I got this. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be an escalator. But if I stay with it, as you say, stay with pain and just stay with it and steady as she goes, and don't run away, but stay with it. And as you say, don't be judgmental. See, I'm learning. I was taking notes. But I guess where I'm going is, what do you think is the function? Here's a better question. What is the function of faith in this equation?
Yeah, that's it. That's a wonderful. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, first I was going to say there is this definition of dukkha by Buddhist teacher that I really like. He says dukkha is asking life to give us something that life cannot give us. That's what dukkha is. So that's pretty much the answer of it. Wanting life to give us something that life is not meant to give us. So it's the discovery of that. But faith, to me, is a huge element, and it's the faith well understood, a faith that is this absolute trust in the process, in the greater power, in the unfoldment of things. It is to me, like, if not the major, if not the one and only, one of the major ones for sure. Because with that faith, then everything else can be lived and experienced. And when that faith has a sense of you are being held, you are being supported. For some people, even this feeling of you are loved in every step of the way, like you cannot imagine or conceive. It's like, I can do anything and everything.
Very powerful. Does anybody have any final comments or questions that we can ask of?
Close on time. Sorry, you were saying?
Well, I was just going to say, if anybody has any.
Oh, okay.
I said, yeah. So.
All right.
There goes Monica. I knew she would.
I just want to say thank you for such a gorgeous meditation. Really is what it felt like, beginning to end, and a whole new level of a whole new way of seeing the idea of contentment. This student walks away with. So thank you very much. Just beautiful.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you for being here. And thank you, all of you, for inviting me, for sharing this moment with me. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Juliana. We hope you'll come again. So I won't publicly ask you, will you do it? But I just hope you will.
Well, I will. Just ask me, I will.
All right. Thank you very, very much. And thank you all for coming.